Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Wednesday morning. God, can't see with the lights. Wednesday morning edition of Sidelines. I got a great show in store for us today. Going to be joined in just a moment by Matt Dean over in Memphis, the coach, followed by that Scott Rabalais in Baton Rouge, talking about LSU, the CFP playoff, and Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy announcement is going to be this Saturday. Everybody's going to be watching that. Right now, I got to say, it's Jaden Daniels first, Michael Penix Jr. second, and Bo Nix third. Maybe Milroe or Marvin Harrison Jr. Is fourth or fifth, whatever. But, it'd be kind of cool. It would be really cool to be invited to New York, even if you don't win it, just to be part of the festivities at the downtown Athletic Club in New York. And in the second hour, Johnny Ballpark Franks joins us. He is really on fire. He's got a great take. I heard him on a radio station in Orlando yesterday evening, talking about the Florida State snub in the college football playoff. He's going to make a great argument. Johnny would be a great lawyer. And in the fourth segment, Vince Ferrara from the Sports Animal up in Knoxville is going to check in with us as well. Okay. So I think we're all looking for answers to, what is going on in college football right now. What is the narrative? I heard Gus Malzahn's comments, heard his comments about, I don't really like, it's not a good look for college football. He's right. Hell, he's absolutely right. And, who among us is who doesn't agree with that? I don't think anybody disagrees with that. He goes, I'm not an FSU fan. Obviously, I'm the coach at UCF, but I'm a Mike fan. I'm a Mike Norvell fan too. Having lived in Memphis a long time and being a Memphis native. And I was proud of what he did at the University of Memphis. But he's madder than hell. And you can't blame any of these guys. You can't blame any of them for feeling the way that they feel. All right. So anyway, we do this 25 times a month, over 300 shows a year. We're broadcasting live from Smyrna, right next to the Brave Stadium here at Mallory. Tyler Chandler's having a great time over here. Happy birthday to my wife, Aldred/Mildred. Man, it's great to have her. She is the brains behind everything that I do, it seems like, and doing a phenomenal job. Matt Dean is with us right now. And Matt, I think you got back this morning at 2:30, you said, on that Greyhound ride from Las Vegas. But wish you could have been on there with us. That, again, like the first Washington-Oregon game, was one of the best college football games I watched all year. I look at Oregon, I look at Washington, and I'm sitting there going, how good is the Pac-12? Washington had 13 fifth-year seniors and 13 sixth-year seniors. I don't know how many Oregon has. That's a pretty damn good football. What were your takeaways other than you didn't like the final score?
Good morning, Rob. Great to be back. And we got in late Saturday night. It was a quick trip, but anytime you get a chance to see your son and watch that quality of football game, it was definitely worth it. I do have a couple quick thoughts. You just touched on one of my thoughts, what's really interesting. I saw a stat that Washington had a combination of 20 and fourth, fifth, maybe even six-year guys that were on the field, and Oregon had the fourth youngest roster in college football. I thought that was an interesting stat because a lot of people are going to say, well, Bo didn't get done. I don't buy that at all. In the first quarter, our SEC transfer from South Carolina, Jordan Burch, who was a big part of our defensive line rotation, got hurt in that football game. And what happened was, over time, Washington was able to run the football more against us this game than the first game. Not making excuses. Hey, they beat us. It was a hell of a game. I will give a lot of credit to Oregon. Bad start, down 20-3, come back, take a 24-20 lead. The place is going nuts. Great atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then we thought we had a fumble recovery in the next drive, which if we score, we're up 2 scores early fourth quarter. We think game over. After 5 minutes of no reviews on the jumbo screens, they come back and overturn it. My youngest son has texted me from home like, Dad, that's BS, blah, blah, blah. It was a 50-50 call, Rob.
Yeah.
And, who knows? If it's a different team, maybe it doesn't get overturned. You just never know. There's a conspiracy theory for everything. But bottom line, all the credit to Washington. I think they're a tough out. I think they're going to beat Texas personally in the semis. That's just me. I don't know what the next game after that looks like, but I think they're going to beat Texas.
Well, it's going to come down to the line of scrimmage. And you look at the line of scrimmage, the offensive line, Washington versus the defensive line of Texas. Who gets the advantage there?
Well, Texas has those 2 big guys in the middle. I don't know their names for sure here.
Sweat is one of them because he caught a touchdown pass Saturday.
Right. They do a good job of stopping the run, right?
Yeah.
Now, Washington, left tackle number 55, my son who's in the scouting business says, Dad, he's going to play in the league for a long time. So I think both lines of scrimmage are going to be really interesting. I would say this, Penix hasn't got touched much all year. And people believe he's got 3 wide receivers that are going to play in the league around him, okay? Yeah. So Texas has had some secondary problems. So if they make Washington one-dimensional, can Washington counter and do a good enough job against Quinn Ewers to make it I think it's got a chance to be a shootout. It could be a fun game, really. I do. It's a rematch of last year's Alamo Bowl, which I think Washington won by a touchdown.
Okay.
No, they're different stakes on the line this time, right?
Yeah, it will be. I mean, Kalen DeBoer came from Indiana, was offensive coordinator at Indiana under Tom Allen.
I believe so. I also had a big background, I believe, in NAIA football. So he's been a head coach before at a different level.
Yeah.
But, he obviously had a relationship with Michael Penix when he was there, if that's the case. And, it shows.
Well, you like coaches that have been at NAIA, Division II, Division III. They understand every part of building a team. They understand what everybody's role is because they probably had to do it. Yeah. Might have had to chalk the field. They may have to do, a lot of the hiring. You get a coach that's too far removed from the day-to-day operations, you get in trouble. If you delegate too much authority, it's gonna bite you. It really is. Peter in Utah, he's talking Utah, Alabama, Mike. Matt, that's over in the Black Belt of Alabama, EUTAW. That's in Greene County. The CFP committee has an agenda. Put the best 4 teams in the finals. I agree with that. But let me tell you I took some notes last night. And, I've been saying this, what I think about NIL. Look, I'm not a fan on the surface for what it is. I think the way it's done, put the money in age-banded trust, incentive-based trust. And as far as the portal goes, guys have always transferred, Matt. You know that as a coach.
Yeah.
But if they're transferring because of the wrong reasons, those same problems will follow them from school A to school B and school C and so on. That's just what's going to happen. But I believe NIL investors, the boosters, are going to save the bowls. Because if the contracts are written right, they're going to say in there, you better not quit on your team. And if you do, you owe 50 to 75% of that NIL money back, if not all of it. Ohio State is a perfect example of what's wrong with college football. You've got a coach, Ryan Day, there. I know there's pressure to beat your rival, but look at all the guys quitting on the team. Again, you can use the politically correct, sanitized version and call it opting out. They're quitting. You're either on the team or you have quit. We have got to stop sugarcoating this stuff. All right? So I tell you what, I watched SEC Network last night with Dari Noka, Matt Stinchcomb, Chris Doring, and Takeo Spikes. Those are 4 of the best they've got. along with Cole Kubelik and Roman Harper. And I got to tell you, I am so proud of that Missouri. They interviewed one of their players, a really good defensive player from up in Michigan. They are elated about going to play in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. They're like, they asked him about guys, quitting. I'm not saying opting out. I used the term quitting. And he said, no, man, we're all in. He goes, we're so excited. And I was glad to hear Chris Doring say, man, it reminds me of the days when I played, man. You made a bowl game. You're playing with your teammates. Those are your brothers for the rest of your life. And that we have got to quit allowing and having these clowns on TV coddle these brats that are quitters just to make them feel less uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you something. I don't run with my wife when I go for a run because she goes, you'll just run off and leave me. We run separately. I mean, or I'll go walk with her. But I'm not saying that I'm fastest man in the world, but I'm not going to slow down. And I don't chat. Running is not a social activity, And I think I'm so in Iowa, people criticizing. Okay, they got beat 24-10. If they had a decent offense, God Almighty, do they hit and do they develop players? There's a lot of great stories in college football, but at the end of the day, find me a fan base like Iowa that is so grateful and love their Hawkeyes. They didn't win the Big Ten. I know that. But damn, get you a kid that went to Iowa, put him in the NFL. That kid's going to be the first one to practice every day, and he's going to outwork everybody. He's not a prima donna. He's not going to be one that was born on third base and thinks he hit a triple. I want a Hawkeyes hoodie. I'm going to order one. I'm serious. I'm not saying that because you're on here, but Kirk Ferentz, I had some great clients for many, many years. For the record, the only people I've ever known in my life who kept a vacation home in Des Moines when they lived in Memphis. Not many people do that.
No, that's true. Rob, couple thoughts on what you just said. First of all,
said a lot.
First of all, I'm proud of Bo Nix. Tough loss, was not going to play for the national championship game. The result of the game may have cost him the Heisman, even though I thought he did his part, and he comes out the next day and says, I'm going to play in the bowl game. I'm going to play in the bowl game. And yeah. Rob, what has he got? He has nothing left to prove. I mean, but he wants to be there for his teammates. Well, it kind of goes back to what you just talked about in the first part of your rant there. The second part is I'm awfully proud of Iowa football. I know you may have saw yesterday when their defensive coordinator, Phil Parker, won the Broyles Award. I don't know if you saw
in Little Rock.
And he is just – you talk about what he has done for Iowa football. He's been with Kirk since 1999. And his first half of his career there, he worked for a guy named Norm Parker. Rest in peace, Norm Parker. That was our former defensive coordinator, but no relation to Phil. Phil played defensive back at Michigan State. A lot of people come after Phil Parker every year. He doesn't want to leave. He doesn't care. He wants to stay with Kirk. He had an interview with Big Ten Network, Jerry DiNardo, the former coach at Indiana LSU. And one of the things that he said about losing, about learning from his predecessor, Norm Parker, was he had told him, never underestimate a win. They're so hard to get, right? Mm-hmm. That you can always dissect tape up and figure out what went wrong and criticize this guy, whatever. And another thing he learned is in that room where you have all those student assistants, analysts, GAs, he wanted to hear from everyone, regardless if he was going to use it or not. And Phil gave the example that one of his former student assistants is now maybe the linebacker coach for the Detroit Lions. but he wanted to empower those guys, may not use everything they gave him, but he wanted to make sure that the younger coaches in the room always felt like they had a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, that's one of the things that my son feels right now at the University of Oregon with Dan Lanning.
Yeah.
He wants to hear from everyone. On Friday, getting ready for the biggest game of his career, my son's in the room and he gets called on. All right, Tyler, give me the injury report for Washington. Now, it may not sound like a big deal. Hell, you can probably print that thing up and read it yourself. But the fact of the matter is, he involves so many people. And I think that stat I gave you about them having the fourth youngest roster in college football, Oregon's coming. It wouldn't shock me if next year they're in the Big Ten championship. Would not shock me a bit. Wouldn't shock me.
I love the fact that he won the Broyles Award. That's huge.
Yes.
And I'll say this for the record. You as a coach would agree, I bet. Goat worshipers don't make good assistants. These young coaches that sit on their hands in the staff meetings and they're just kind of looking up. And I'm sure Nick Saban has to deal with it a lot. Now Kirby Smart does.
Yeah.
Some of these other ones. You want them when you say, look, I need your input. There's nothing worse than working for a company when you go to these meetings and they ask if anyone has a comment or question or suggestion or whatever, and people are scared, intimidated, whatever, to say anything because they're worried about losing their job. Don't ask a question if you're not serious. And what I see is, I love that. Give those young coaches, you better, because where are the young coaches going to come from? From that staff meeting. You got to do it. I mean, you are a coach. I mean, again, if you're a colonel, you're always the colonel forever. Same thing as a coach. I call you coach.
Yeah.
But when you say, all right, you're coaching my defensive backs, what do I need to do to support you better? What do we need to do? No, coach, it's all good. Yeah, because you're making $800,000 a year. You don't want to jeopardize that. Versus, look, I need 2 more players. I don't know where you can find them, but I need them. People appreciate. Listen, I was in a meeting one time with, on estate planning, and my attorney was talking, and he said something about the 4 documents that you need. Durable power, healthcare power, living will, and last will and testament. And he talked about all this estate planning stuff. And, doctors might do this. They might do that. They might play golf with this person or that person. And he did not know that my client was the CEO of a major hospital. And it was, I was like, when he said what he said, and he was making a point, the guy looked, and it was kind of like he started laughing. And a few months later, he called me and said, guess where I just left from? And I said, where? And he said, I left from, your attorney. He just did all my estate planning. See, he liked his honesty. As a coach, elaborate on that, how important it is for real feedback.
So I'll give you a great story. Coach Herb Hilgman, who's we just dedicated the floor for this year, Rob. You remember me talking to you about that?
Oh, yeah.
My first year as being an assistant, he was getting ready to promote me from the second chair to the first chair. So I was going to be basically going from a part-time assistant to a full-time assistant in men's basketball, right? This is back in the 90s. And he looked at me and he said, Matt, what's the most important thing that I need from you as an assistant coach? And I was like, well, coach, I got to get you players. I got to help, recruit. And obviously it's a big part of the job. And he looked at me and he said, man, loyalty. He goes, there are times that we can disagree, and we have to. But it's all about time and place. We do it one-on-one in this office. When we're around the players, we are a united front. And it always stuck with me. And it's like, whenever I went to a timeout, I had several assistants in my career, and usually I had 2 part-time people. First thing I would ask them, all right, what plays next? What defense next? What do you want me to say? And sometimes you go around and be like, okay, no. I'm not taking it. I want devil advocate, but I may not use your suggestion every time, but I want to hear what you're thinking, Rob. I got to hear your thoughts, because All it is that one thought that's a yes that may help us win a basketball game or a football game or whatever you're talking about. And you're right, Rob. You can't just zip it up. You've got to be, as an assistant coach, you've got to give your boss or your head coach everything in your mind. You've got to empty that lot to give him or her the idea of what it's going to take to improve in the next X amount of minutes of this game. And I learned a lot from that one message from Coach was it's okay to disagree, but sometimes we got to make sure we don't want to sit there and have an argument in front of the players.
Yeah.
Right. But we do need to have those tough conversations sometimes one-on-one.
Yeah, you're right. And people that are afraid to give feedback are not going to be successful.
No,
because they're not going to ask for feedback from other people. I mean, I get critiqued all the time in what I do on this show by my 95-year-old dad. He's listening every day. God, he's brutal, but it's good. And my mother.
You need that.
Yeah, it is. You need constant feedback.
Yes.
Sometimes, I mean, my dad, we had the coolest conversation, a friend of mine and I, about a story. We were talking about, the Michigan and the signals and all, and the scandal with that. We're talking about the CBHS Central game back in 43 or 44 when he was in school there. And there was a famous game where they were spying from a tower, and it was unbelievable. And Mayor Crump made the teams have a rematch in what he called the Blind Bowl, ironically for that. But God, the man's memory was absolutely perfect detail. Tom Hammond, one of his classmates, Christian Brothers, class of 47, wrote the book on it. But man, you better have mentors that you can go to as a coach. Right now, who other than Herb Hilgerman do you look to, because you're still a coach.
Yeah.
I mean, that you're a Swiss Army knife. I mean, sometimes you're working with women's field hockey. You can do anything, because more importantly than anything else, you know how to work with people and get the best out of it.
No, I appreciate that, Rob. I still have colleagues that I coached against in the league that I'll watch their teams play and I'll text them after a big win and we'll talk. And eventually that conversation leads to, what are your thoughts? What did you see? Right. So it's funny. I probably haven't told you this. I'm actually still helping work with a couple players individually on our women's basketball team. I'm an old post coach. I love working with the bigs. And I have a couple players that I've worked with, and I really love it when I get those 30-minute segments with those players. I mean, that's all I need, because I don't need to get on the bus anymore, Rob. I've done my bus mileage. I promise you that. I've had my share of trips. But, I still have a mentor from my days at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, Mike Siegelman, who was my first true boss that got me in as a graduate assistant that helped get me the job at Rhodes. Him and his wife, Susan, have retired to Hot Springs, Arkansas. So, I try to connect with Mike once a year if I can. We did lunch at Bayou Bar and Grill. He was coming through Memphis this past summer. And we did a Zoom with all of his – one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of is during COVID, it was his idea to get all of his former GAs together and Zoom and just check in on everybody, right?
Yep.
We got this screen of 30 people. So he retired approximately, 2016, 2017-ish, okay? Well, think about this. I was his GA in 1989 through 91. So on this screen are all these young people that came after me. I was one of his first GAs. And just it was the coolest moment for me, and really for Mike, was seeing the appreciation that all of us had for him, because we're not in this spot if he doesn't take a chance on us. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize about all these great coaches. Like, let's go Kirby and let's go Nick. At some point when they were younger, someone took a chance on them. And really, for Kirby and Nick, a lot of that is Bill Belichick. And really, same thing for Kirk Ferentz. You don't realize this, but Ferentz, Saban, and Ferentz and Saban were both connected to Belichick at one point, I think, on the Browns in his first NFL job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, you look at Kirby Smart. What was it, 9 years, defensive coordinator for Nick? I'm not
9.
sure. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't think
07 to
that's
15.
right? I mean, my God, it's hard to beat him, but heck, it's really helped you against everybody else, right? And I'll say this. One last thing I want to say about Saturday. You and I haven't talked about the final decision.
Yeah.
There is part of me that believes that we should have taken the 3 undefeateds in Georgia. And I'll tell you why. Because Georgia is kind of getting overlooked here. 29 in a row. I know that's in different years. They're 12-0. They miss a field goal and they fumble a punt return inside the 10. Clearly that one catch that Alabama got was 50-50 at best. You have to admit that. Yeah. 3-point game, Rob. 3-point game. So everybody was really hung up on Texas beat Alabama. I get that. You got to take Texas in.
Yeah.
Well, if you'd taken Georgia, then you wouldn't have to worry about Texas, Alabama. And the last thought on this, it goes back to the ACC commissioners, because you remember, Rob, we were ready to have 12 teams in this year, and there was a couple commissioners, the ACC included, that said, no, we're not doing it this year. Shame on them. If we had 12 right now, Rob, it'd be a hell of a ride, brother. It would be a hell of a ride.
I'll just mention before we go to a quick commercial break, the Alliance back in February of 22. Yes. The ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12. Karma's a witch, isn't it?
It is.
Scott Rabalais from the Baton Rouge Advocate is going to join us, one of the best sports writers you'll find anywhere, and a true grit journalist, traditionalist, still wears the coat and tie always. What a gentleman. Like Tony Barnhart, in honor of the great ones like Furman Bisher, the great writers. After this commercial break, we'll get into it. Man, there's a lot to talk about. Jaden Daniels, the CFP, LSU, right back after this.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shoppe health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you. Matt Dean, before Scott Rabalais comes on, there's just the frustration. I can feel it. We're in Atlanta right now before we head back to Memphis. And the FSU fan base, they're upset. They're all upset. But Monday, Matt, I have to get you on. I'm going to have the CEO Monday of the Cheez-It Bowl down where Iowa and Tennessee are playing.
That's right. Steve
Hogan is going to join us on the show. I'm hoping he'll send like a big box of Cheez-Its to us for promotion for the bowl, because that could be the best bowl there is, unless, Ham's Beer had a bowl, but I don't know if they'll do that there. I don't know if they have that in the budget, but anyway, all these bowl games, I think the boosters, the investors in NIL are going to start being loud and saying, here's the deal, brother. If you walk out on me and my investment, I'd love to read these contracts. I don't know how they're written, Matt, but this is just, think about this. Well, that's Scott, but Bo Nix playing in the bowl game. This is big. We need it for college football, and I'm all about protecting people because obviously I manage people's money for a living on side. I'm doing this show 6 days a week, but I want to say that I love the college, and Scott Rabalais is on with us right now from Baton Rouge, covers LSU and college football, one of the best sports writers anywhere. And this is Matt Dean, coach up at Rhodes College in Memphis, whose son's on the staff with Dan Lanning out at Oregon, just got back from Las Vegas. And by the way, did you see Don Rickles at the casino, Matt, when you were out there just at the betting places? That's got to be a fun place for college football game.
I will tell you, it's a pleasure to be on the show with you, Scott. I will tell you, I broke even with my wife at the blackjack table, and don't think that's not a big time feat because can only find a $25 minimum table, just so you know. So that break even point was huge for the Dean family. But Scott, I want to tell you, I was at the LSU A&M game. We have a family friend who's your starting punter, Jay Bramlett. My youngest son has played ball with him when he was, 6, 7, 8 years old, and we followed his career, and we're real close with his family, and just real impressed with that day. LSU, obviously, what can you? And Jaden Daniels, if he wins the Heisman, kudos to him. He's had such a great career for you guys, and if the defense was just maybe a couple stops better here or there, we'd be having some different conversations. But no, it's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah,
that's right.
Scott, go ahead.
The offense was great. The defense not so much, and the offense was so good. Jay he's punted 21 times this year, which I think is the second. LSU's on pace for the second fewest punts in a season ever. He's been like the commercials, the old commercials with the Maytag repairman, and he's just kind of sitting there, just kind of watching a lot. But he's done a good job when they needed him to punt. But it's been a tale of two seasons, or it's a kind of a tale of two teams. This great offense, number one in the country, and this historically bad defense for LSU. So, and as you said, a few plays here or there, especially the Ole Miss game, which they scored 49 on the road and they still lost. But otherwise, they'd be in a New 6 bowl, and I think Jaden Daniels would already have. I think everyone would say he has the Heisman sewn up at this point.
Well, looking at the Heisman right now, I rank it as Jaden Daniels number 1, Penix 2, Bo Nix 3. Talk about his journey coming from California, played at Arizona State, and he could have left early for the NFL, couldn't he?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think that was the expectation when Jaden came here from Arizona State, where he had been a starter, that he was just going to stay 1 year and then go. But the staff convinced him, I think, that one more year of development would really benefit him as far as his pro prospects go. I mean, he was, going to be way down the list if he came out last year as far as the NFL draft goes. And now, some people are saying, could he be a first round pick? And obviously, his improvement has just, who could have predicted it? I don't think even Brian Kelly or Matt Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, or Joe Sloan, the quarterback's coach, could have told him, you could win the Heisman if you come back. No one would have probably said that, but his growth has been tremendous, and it's what you see sometimes in college football, and not dissimilar to what Joe Burrow did here. When he arrived in 2018, he had his first season had some very good moments, a few rocky ones. But he improved, and then by his second year in 2019 just took off. So a lot of credit to Jaden and to LSU's coaches for having the foresight to say, one more year would really benefit you, and it could benefit him in a way that he could become college football immortality. With the Heisman,
which he is becoming, Matt.
No, I think right now Jaden's got to be the favorite. Even though I think Michael Penix, I was at the game last Friday night. helped his case with the second win over the Ducks. And, Bo's probably third in that conversation. But I will tell you, I wouldn't have a problem if any one of those three guys won it. I mean, I'm just telling you, they've all had Heisman statistical years. And, I noticed they invited Marvin Harrison Jr. to the award, and he could end up being the number one pick in the draft, guys, ironically, because my Chicago Bears hopefully will take him with that Carolina pick they got last year. But, it just goes to show you that you look at Jaden's story. He left Arizona State, had 2 fabulous years with LSU. Bo Nix had enough and found his right spot, even though his dad's a legacy and revered there. And I'd have to also, Rob, point out that his dad is playing for a high school state championship, or may have won it. He was not.
No, it's tonight. It's tonight in Tuscaloosa, and it's my wife's birthday, and I'm trying to convince her they've got really good food at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and we can stop on the way back from Atlanta. Scott, give me some selling points, both of y'all.
No,
it's right on the way back to Memphis from Atlanta. We're over here visiting the daughter. I mean,
sure.
I really need to be there.
But my last point to tie with what Scott said, I mean, you look at Jaden and Bo, my gosh, 2 years ago, no one was talking about them in the NFL that much. Now, my gosh, I mean, I can see Jaden Daniel playing the Super Bowl one day. Bo Nix too. You just never know, because those extra 2 years that they took to listen to a different voice, maybe a different OC. With Bo's case, Kenny had coached him at Auburn. So that was a little different. I thought there was a really big connection that first year, and Dillingham left to go to Arizona State as the head coach last year. But watching Jaden in person, he just throws such a nice ball, Scott. I mean, his deep ball is phenomenal. The thing I worry about him is when he gets out of the pocket in the NFL, he's just got to learn to slide a little bit better. But other than that, I think he's got a bright future.
Yeah, everyone said that all year. It's kind of almost been, I say, a running joke, but it's been like, Jaden, we used to say that about Joe Burrow. God, Joe doesn't slide, and Jaden got a little bit better about that. But yeah, he's going to have to be more judicious about the way he runs in the NFL, because he won't be able to run as much, and he won't be able to run like he does sometimes. But his running ability is just what sets him apart. Yes. I think. And you're right. All those guys, all those quarterbacks, former transfers who blossomed to their new schools would be worthy winners. I think Jaden's the best player in the country, and I think he's probably gonna win it. But his running ability sets him apart. And I thought there was something Trevor Maddich on ESPN said a few weeks ago about him that I thought was very very insightful. He said most quarterbacks who run like Jaden does don't have very good touch on the deep ball. Quarterbacks who have very good touch on the deep ball don't run like he does, and he does both exceptionally well. There was a sequence in the Florida game. We do a podcast, 2 podcasts a week on our website, theadvocate.com, for LSU football. And I was talking about this Monday. It was a sequence in the Florida game where he threw a 41-yard pass to Brian Thomas on the Florida sideline, just dropped it right over the defensive back, pretty well covered. And then the next play, he took off and ran for 38 yards. Yeah. And I don't think there's anyone in the country who can do those things back to back, and he can do that a lot, and of course he had the 85-yard run against Florida, people remember, and stuff like that. He's the 26th leading rusher in the country. He had a 1,000-yard rushing season. He's got more total yards than all but 46 teams in the FBS. His total offense is better than Florida's total offense, or Michigan's, or Alabama's, just as an entire team. So it's just been a tremendous season. It's been a joy to watch him, and something else too. He just seems like a great young guy. He doesn't get all full of himself. He doesn't get there's not a lot of ego there. They showed him on the video screen at the women's basketball game the other night. He was at, and he was kind of like, oh, the camera's on me, kind of smiling, and in a sheepish way. He'd be a good representative for the Heisman. I think they'd be pretty pleased to have him as one of their winners.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Pierre T. Landash from Baton Rouge just watching now, and Bud Ritchie, and they would agree with you there. But here's another one: JD in Collierville, Tennessee. How did LSU not get matched up with Notre Dame in a bowl game? I think that's just a magical game. I mean, I remember as a kid, and you do too, and Matt, Notre Dame and LSU and Baton Rouge. But anytime they play, it's marquee game.
Yeah, it would have been a compelling bowl game for sure, especially with the Brian Kelly having coached there for 12 years and left Notre Dame to come to LSU. And there's still a lot of players and coaches. Obviously, Marcus Freeman, their current head coach, coached under Brian. Someone Ed Orgeron tried to hire as defensive coordinator, actually to LSU, and Marcus, obviously made a good career move where he's now the head coach at Notre Dame. It looked for weeks like it was going to be LSU and Notre Dame in the Rabalais Quest Bowl in Tampa, but that's traditionally a Big Ten slot, SEC versus Big Ten, and apparently, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but Alabama getting in the playoff started knocking over a string of bowl dominoes to where I saw this reported on a Notre Dame website. You had ended up with Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Miami. Notre Dame is in the ACC bowl pool. Notre Dame, North Carolina, Miami for the Pinstripe Bowl, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and the Sun Bowl. And they picked those out of a hat, basically. And Notre Dame's going to the Sun Bowl. So LSU's got a traditional opponent in Wisconsin. Some people would say, oh, LSU didn't want to play Notre Dame. Brian Kelly didn't want to play Notre Dame. I don't think Brian would have been thrilled to play Notre Dame. I don't think he was his first choice. But I don't believe LSU was going to stand in the way of them meeting. And I think if that had been the game, that had been the game. But I think they're probably I think Brian personally, on a personal level, is probably happier that he doesn't have to answer all those questions about Notre Dame and their former players and former coaches and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
And looking at it, and then Matt and I were talking in the segment before you joined us, and Tony Barnhart was on yesterday. He feels like that the CFP got it right in the 4 teams that they selected. What are your thoughts? Because I've got 2 boatloads of respect for the 2 of you as great writers, but you're fair and you're objective. You're like good judges. I mean, you would hammer LSU if it was the right thing to do, but you're not going to do it just, to get Click Farm in India to go crazy. I mean, it's legitimate. So I want to hear your thoughts, because a lot of people are texting me right now going, Scott is special. We want to hear your thoughts.
I don't think the committee got it right. I think that Florida State. Yes, I saw them both play in person. I saw LSU play Florida State in September in Orlando, and I saw Alabama play LSU in Tuscaloosa, and I was at the SEC championship game. And definitely, you have to say Florida State is not the same team without Jordan Travis. Clearly. Yeah. But they won all the games. They did everything that was asked of them. They played and of course they play Florida every year. They played to traditionally strong FCS, Power 5 schools, not FCS, sorry. Power 5 schools and away from home, in Orlando and in Gainesville, and won them both. Won the conference championship game. It wasn't pretty. It was a grind, but as Booger McFarland said, on Sunday, Booger was a little more exercised about this than I'm being, but he's what's wrong with winning with defense? Nothing. Nothing's wrong with winning for defense. And when you look at Alabama. They're a fine team as well, but they lost to Texas, kind of got dominated in that game. They looked bad against South Florida. They squeaked by a 4-8 Arkansas team, and they got, let's be honest, lucky to beat Auburn. Obviously, with that play, you have to execute, and they did, but they got lucky.
That was horrible.
Florida State. I think I don't like. We all bring biases and things. I vote on the AP poll. And there's things you think about. Yeah, I saw this team, or I think a lot of this team, or I don't, and it affects how you vote. And frankly, I don't think if Alabama was Oklahoma State, sitting there with their record, having just won their conference. Or let's say Ole Miss. Let's say Ole Miss got into the SEC championship game with only one loss, and they beat Georgia in the championship game. I think they would have picked Florida State. I think there's a bias towards Alabama and the body of work. It's not supposed to be that way. You don't consider all the years that they've been successful, and obviously they've been tremendously successful. And this has been a great job of Nick Saban to get them this far, maybe his best, as people say. But I think Florida State, winning a Power 5 conference and winning the games they did, and winning, to me, winning without Jordan Travis enhances their case to be in the playoff, and it's just the same. And I will say this, and I said this to another writer who was doing the column. I've got an AP vote, and I still have Florida State third in my poll. If Alabama or Texas wins the national championship with one loss, and Florida State beats Georgia in the Orange Bowl, I may still vote Florida State number one. If it's Michigan or Washington at 15-0, I'll probably kind of find it hard to do that. But if and it's a tough task for Florida State to beat Georgia in the Orange Bowl, clearly. But if they do, I would consider casting my number one vote for Florida at the end, because I think they deserve it.
Wow. Matt, jump in.
Yeah, I think Scott's got it right. And I want to add some fodder here to it, because I just told you before Scott came on, my debate would have started with the 4 spot of Alabama, Texas, Georgia. But here's another thing I want people to know. I'm a Big Ten guy, Scott. Grew up in the state of Iowa fan. Unfortunately, we'd love to have Jaden Daniels. But let's just face it. Michigan had 226 yards of total offense in the Big Ten championship game against an Iowa offense that had a hard time getting a first down, but we want to glorify them at 1. Hey, to me right now, Washington is 1. They've beaten Oregon, who I think is a definite top 5, top 6 team, twice by 3 points. Okay? Another thing. Let's look at Texas, take a deep dive. They could have very easily lost to Kansas State. Kansas State decided to go for it in that 4th down instead of choosing a second overtime from 4th and goal at the 4. Okay? They could have easily lost to Kansas State. They struggled against Iowa State, and I get it. Alabama's struggling some wins too, no doubt about it. But, if they would have taken Florida State and put in Texas and left at Alabama, or taken Alabama over Texas and say, head-to-head matters, but it was week 2, so you're a different team there. You could have made the argument to piss off Texas and take Florida State, because here's the thing. Florida State has elite defense, and they were going to get their number 2 quarterback in the bowl game back. We know it was a concussion. He couldn't play in a week turnaround. So there's nothing wrong with winning 16-6. Essentially, that's what Michigan did against Iowa, but no one even talks about that because we think Michigan is this dominant team. Yes, they have a great offense line. I love Blake Corum. J.J. McCarthy is very versatile. But you know what? It wouldn't shock me if they're one and done again, guys. It would not shock me. They're not. The Big Ten is not that strong. I am telling you, I watch it every week.
You know more about the Big Ten than anybody. That's why we love having you on the show. But, Scott, that top 4, who are the writers like you and Tony Barnhart on the West Coast? I mean, y'all are a tight fraternity, but I don't see the advocates out there that can make a case like what Matt just said and what you just said. And an AP poll, we just put it up here for people that haven't looked at it. It's Michigan, Washington, Texas, and FSU. That's somebody's got a lot of faith in them, or a lot of people do.
Yeah, it was tough. I voted Michigan number 1 over Washington. I think because I don't think Washington's defenses, they've been a little porous at times this year, and they've had a couple of clunker games. One of the games I saw them play the most was against Arizona State, and it was a very poor effort, and they could have lost that game. But you got Michigan, they've got much better defense, and Washington is a much better offense, and Washington could have, for the same price, Washington could have been the number 1 seed in the playoff, or be number 1 in the AP poll, and I would have no problem with if they went out, seeing them be the number 1 team, because they would deserve it. But it's it's I thought all year there, and I think Georgia bore this out by losing to Alabama. There aren't any super dominant teams in college football this year. Everyone's got some flaws. Everyone's got some things you can point to and say, yeah, well, they're great at this, but they're not great at that. And I think all these teams, I think you can make the argument of the four that are in the playoff. Texas is probably playing the best right now. They've been looked like the most complete team. With Quinn Ewers healthy, they're really good. So you expect he'll be fully healthy by the time they play in the Sugar Bowl against Washington. Hopefully, a lot of those Washington, Texas people will come to New Orleans and spend money down here. We sure would appreciate it. Washington's got a long way to come, and I'm sure they'd rather be in the Rose Bowl, but it's going to be a great matchup nonetheless. But all this said, it's the debate is part of what makes sports fun, right? I mean, we can say who's the best this, who's the worst that. They're deserving, they're not deserving, and I do feel bad for the Florida State kids. I mean, they did everything, like I said, they did everything that was asked of them, and they didn't get in. But at the same time, it's we'll never forget it. We'll never forget this decision. This 2023 season, and we'll see how it shakes out. But it's part of the fun of it. And I guess, boy, if we needed an example, an exhibit A for why they expanded the college football playoff, I guess this situation would be it, because all these teams that we're talking about would be comfortably in the playoff next year. And it would just be a matter of whether or not they're getting a bye into the second round as one of the top four conference champions, or they're having to play at home or on somebody's home field in the first round. So we'll see how it is next year. Obviously, it'll be vastly different, but we all kind of knew this was going to happen. This could happen, right? I mean, Brian Kelly said this in his press conference yesterday. You had 5 Power 5 conferences still at this point, and 4 spots in the playoffs. So you said you knew this could happen, and everyone agreed to the system. So this is what you could get if you get this kind of scenario. That's how it played out.
Yeah, and the alliance we talked about earlier back in February of 22 with the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12, no 12-team playoff prior to 24. I mean, has anybody brought that up with them, and they probably have, and they don't want to talk about it. And that's really what hurt. And Florida State, Auburn in 2004, when the 1 and 2 Southern Cal and Oklahoma at the beginning of the season went 12 games or 11 games back then without losing, and so Auburn was stuck there at number 3. Right. And it's awful. Here's the thing for both of you: Florida State schedule, people are ripping on their schedule, and all, but you play the schedule that you get, and again, there other players have been injured. Michigan with all that they did, and I like Harbaugh. I just think he's hell of a coach, but they're still in the deal because the playoff committee's like, that's not our job. We're not a rules governance body. We're there to rank the teams, but I guess they're there to say if your first team quarterback gets hurt, you can't be in the Final Four. That's a good argument. Y'all are both making me think a lot, and I'm getting a lot of feedback. And think about it like that, man. That's what we love about college football too. It's always interesting.
The one thing I want to say, and I'm not here to hammer Michigan because I'm a Big Ten guy, but we talk about their defense and they have some numbers, but you look at their schedule: East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, a tough Rutgers team, right? Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State was horrible this year. Purdue, they played 2 games. They played Penn State on the road, which I give them a lot of credit for. They ran the ball the entire second half, and they beat a good Ohio State team at home. So we're going to find out. Scott's right. We're going to find out. The games are going to play out. We're going to find out how good Michigan is, because I'm going to tell you what, line of scrimmage, Alabama's clicking the line of scrimmage. That's going to be a tough game. And if Michigan beats Alabama, then I am totally wrong, and go Wolves. But I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening.
Yeah. Scott?
I got to go, guys. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Have a safe trip to Iowa. And, Scott, there's so many. I mean, I'm getting a lot of questions, and I know we just got a few minutes, and really appreciate you taking time to join us. But talk about that schedule with Michigan. It was not a tough schedule, and people will say Florida State's schedule wasn't tough, but it was tougher than Michigan's.
No, Florida State didn't play a ranked team until they played Penn State, right? And then, of course, they played Ohio State, which was, of course, one of those classic Michigan Ohio State matchups. And then Iowa was a ranked team as well. Iowa was a 10-win team. Obviously, they're very challenged on offense, but they've done the job to get in the Big Ten championship game. And and like I said, I point to Florida State playing Yellow Shoe, and of course they play Florida every year. And both those games away from home, a little bit like LSU's schedule. LSU played 4 teams in the top 11 in the CFP, all the way from Tiger Stadium. One of them being a neutral site game in Orlando with FSU. Yeah. So it's just, I'm just so when Rob, I can't get out of my mind seeing the scene they showed the Florida State watch party. Everybody just sitting there, they're just devastated. And you can say come back next year, but it's like in the Olympics when Lolo Jones hits the second to last hurdle in the 100-meter hurdles. Come back next time. Well, maybe you don't get it next time. Maybe this was your shot. Kids move on so often in football. Obviously, they graduate, they move on, and that was it. And it's a real shame, but it's that's what happens when you have a committee select things. They say they went by their criteria, which is to include the fact that Florida State's without a great player like Jordan Travis, and no question, like I said, they're not the team I saw in Orlando back in September without him. But they persevered, and this is my thing compared to and I love college sports. I'm a college sports guy through and through, more so than pro sports. But this is the thing that pro sports have better. Say the Philadelphia Eagles earn the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs, and Jalen Hurts, God forbid, gets hurt, the second last game of the season, but they still got the number 1 seed. Is the NFL going to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Eagles, you're not the number 1 seed anymore because you don't have Jalen Hurts"? No, they earned it on the field. No matter who's playing, and they're going to go forward, like that. But it's just what you do on the field, and what Florida State did on the field should have been enough to get in the playoff, in my opinion. Alabama, for all the great season they had, has a loss, and it was a pretty handily they got defeated too by Texas on their home field, and they had these other games where they struggled, and you can say the eye test this and that, but it doesn't really pass with the fact when you're lucky to beat Auburn, which lost the week before to New Mexico State on your home field by 3 touchdowns.
Oh, and that was still having a little trauma from that one. But I tell you, Scott Rabalais, Baton Rouge folks, he'll make you think. I feel so good about the future of college football, though. We went down to Mercedes-Benz Stadium Saturday for the Georgia-Alabama game, Scott, and somebody needs to write the story, though, about all the disenfranchised 3rd and 4th generation scalpers now because of electronic tickets that have been disenfranchised. I mean, I saw Scott.
It's a tough business to get into. Yes,
it is. Hey, but I'm giving another plug for the greatest scalper I've ever known. My man Snake down there in Auburn from Atlanta. He has no last name, but I got his cell phone number. He gets me tickets to everything. His name is Snake, and but I feel great about it after hearing what you just said. Man, Johnny Ballpark Franks is going to be on with us next, and he's an FSU alum. He likes to say, I grew up in a house with 5 sisters that were Auburn fans in Huntsville, and I was an Alabama fan, and I went to Alabama my first year, graduated from Florida State, and he knew Bobby Bowden well. God, there's a lot of arguments. This is great stuff for when he's on here, but again, thank you for taking time to join us. It really appreciate it. And let people know how they can keep up with you. And also, I didn't know you were doing the podcast, so I want to put that up on the screen and let people know they can. That's twice a week that you do that?
Yeah, Mondays it's posted Mondays and Thursdays on just go to The Advocate, and we have a YouTube channel, and of course a lot of stories. Every story that we have is there's some kind of you click on a story on LSU, you're probably going to see the podcast, the latest podcast up there. And the one we did Monday, we had one of our ad managers, Jill Stokel, a dear friend. She graduated. She's from here, but she went to Florida State, and she got in there, and she got to have her moment on the soapbox. So that was fun. But twice a week on theadvocate.com, and you can follow all our stuff there. You just click on sports and pull down LSU, and then you got all our stuff right there. And of course, we've got all kinds of stuff this week about the Heisman and Jaden Daniels. Really good story, but a real quick plug about Wilson Alexander wrote. He talked to LSU's great track coach Dennis Shaver about what makes Jaden Daniels a great runner. Yeah, and Dennis had some great insights to that. So all that stuff's there. And if you want to read, we're heading to New York in the morning to go cover the Heisman ceremony and see if Jaden wins it, and we get to sell a lot of posters that people will put up on their walls.
Yeah, well,
Jaden winning the Heisman.
Well, it's going to be big. And by the way, the last time I talked to you, we had a great new one from the boys from Lake Charles at the hunting club in Park in Arkansas. Beef tongue with mock shoe gravy. You ever had that?
I don't think I've ever had tongue. Mock shoe, yes, I know that is. I don't think I've ever had tongue. I would try it. I'm not averse to it, but no, that's a new one on me.
All right. Hey, look, y'all have a safe trip up. Y'all have a safe trip up there. It is always a pleasure and an honor to have you on. You're a tribute to your profession. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And I'll say a quick hi to Johnny Franks, who I've been on his show many times, a great friend in the business too. Happy holidays to you and
Merry
everyone,
Christmas, buddy.
All your viewers and listeners. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Take care. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Be right back with Johnny Ballpark Franks in a moment.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, man. What a pleasure it is to have Scott Rabalais on, Matt Dean with us, both of them in that first hour. And go to another great one, Johnny Ballpark Franks. Johnny, I listened to that link that you sent me last night from the guy in Orlando. That was fantastic. I didn't even know they had sports radio in Orlando. It's a pro town. Nobody's really from there. Find me an old family from Orlando other than Carney's, at the circus, somebody going, step right up here. Come on, hit the ball, But you were awesome. And
Thank you.
You're in the right profession, but boy, would you really be a wicked badass as a trial lawyer. Because you advocated so many great points. And I go back, Tony Barnhart was on yesterday morning. He said, after all, I got to say the committee, they got it right. But after listening, to Scott Rabalais just now, he had Florida State in his top 4. The Associated Press poll had them in their top 4. And per our conversation, my great-great-grandfather's motto was always, your honor is dearer than your life. I did not say anything about what you told me. I want you to unleash your shock and awe, rolling thunder. Chief Osceola coming out on the Renegade with the spear, and this crowd at Bowden Campbell Stadium is on their feet. The Spanish moss is blowing. And then, by the way, Doug Dean, a regular on this show, you've been on with him, sent me the thread yesterday from John Anderson's song, Seminole Winds. If that's not one, that's one of my favorite songs of all time. But, 195 miles away from the campus at Auburn. And I heard you talking, growing up in a house full of 5 sisters that were Auburn fans. You were the Bama guy, and you end up going to Florida State. Here's the ball. You can talk the next 25. I don't care. I want to hear what you say.
Look, I'm going to apologize because I cannot bring what I was bringing yesterday afternoon. The voice is just not going to be there, but I will bring the facts. And the facts is the committee lied to us. I mean, and here's the thing. I saw the arguments that, people were saying, well, if Florida State has a gripe, they should have voted for the 12-team playoff. Well, people forget it never came down to the ACC and the Big Ten and the Big 12 voting for the expansion of the playoff in 2021. The discussions never got that serious. You know why? People forget what was happening in the summer of 2021. And I don't see anybody bringing this up at the national level, which really irks me about the stupidity at the people who do this for a living at the national level. What was happening in 2021? It's 2 years ago, but we have forgotten. And you know what we have forgot? We forgot that Texas and Oklahoma overnight, unexpectedly, says we're leaving the Big 12 for the SEC.
Yeah.
At the same time, overnight, because all of the presidents and ADs across the land didn't think anything that the Congress was going to get involved and the government was going to get involved and say, hey, your services are now available to be bought and sold to anybody corporation wise. That's why Bryce Young, who had never taken a snap as a starter for Alabama, all of a sudden was making close to $1 million already in just the first month of name, image, and likeness. I still remember Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss's head coach, at the media days in 2021. He got told that, and he was still flabbergasted. You know why? Because when he allowed that news to sink in while he was addressing the 1,000+ members of the media, he realized he doesn't have the boosters or that kind of backing to be able to get those players that kind of money to compete with Alabama, with Auburn, with Michigan, with Southern Cal, with Texas A&M. And then these conferences, heck with wondering whether or not they need to expand from 4 teams to 12 teams. They were wondering if their conferences were going to survive. Remember, it wasn't the Pac-12 in jeopardy in 2021. It was the Big 12 in jeopardy. We didn't think the Big 12 was going to survive in 2021. So this nonsense that I was seeing on Monday, well, it's their fault. The alliance, they should have voted for expansion in 2021. They were just hoping that they would survive, period. Forget about whether or not their team would get in the playoff. The bottom line is the playoff was set up wrong in the first place. I mean, it was almost like a jerk reaction, and mainly because you had Alabama and LSU playing in the BCS system for a national championship. We never thought we would ever see the day that with a 2-team title game to win it all, that we'd have 2 teams from the same conference. And that's what we got in 2011. So then you fast forward, and that's why all of a sudden then we have this conversation about 4 teams. But when it was set up, how many Power 5 conferences do we have? Did you see that number 5?
Yeah.
The committee, are you that stupid to think that the possibility was there that you would have 5 teams? Forget about a 1-loss conference champ. The possibility existed that you could have 5 undefeated champions. Who were you going to leave out? Because you would have to have left out somebody in that scenario. I mean, look at the coaches poll. Who does the coaches have this week as their number 3 team in the country? Is it Texas? Nope. Is it Alabama? Nope. It's Florida State. I still will say this, and even Florida State didn't know this, and I made sure they were aware of this on Monday, spreading it around the campus, spreading around that football office in hopes of keeping as many players or as few players as possible opting out. Florida State can be still voted number 1 team in the country by the Associated Press. Unlike the coaches poll, the AP voters can vote for anyone. They did it in 2003. People forget this. And Scott Rabalais remembers because Nick Saban and LSU, when they won the BCS National Championship game against Oklahoma in 2003, it wasn't LSU being named number 1 by the Associated Press. It was USC. We had a split champion in 2003 in a system that was designed not to have one. And guess what? We can have one this year. If Michigan and Washington lose, which I expect them to do, I think it will be Alabama taking on Texas. If Florida State, say they win by double digits against Georgia, I know people are going to say, well, it's not the same Georgia team. It's not the same Florida State team. But you still have a 14-0 Florida State team over the last 2 years, 5-0 against the SEC, including victories over teams that played for the SEC championship the last 2 years in LSU and Georgia. Last time I checked, the person that's going to be lifting up the hardware on Saturday night, Jaden Daniels with LSU. Did anybody watch that LSU Florida State game the very first week? It wasn't Jordan Travis. They stopped Jaden Daniels. The only score that LSU had was against the third teamers that Florida State put out there, and it was busted coverage on a 75-yard touchdown pass with just over a minute to go. Otherwise, Florida State outscored LSU 31-0 against the Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels. And yes, he will win the Heisman on Saturday night. And I found it ironic that the committee, here's the realization, the real reality. Nobody wants to see this, face this, whatever the case may be. But the reality is, and they're not going to tell you this. And it's really amazing, too. You have the chairman of this committee who represents the ACC in North Carolina State. But you have the chairman of this committee. He's buying into this because he's naive if he really, truly believes that you're not leaving the champion from the Big Ten, especially if they're undefeated, which Michigan was, and you're not leaving a one-loss SEC champ out. You're just not going to do it. Why? Because the last year, the only debate was whether or not the SEC or the Big Ten was going to get a second team in. It wasn't whether or not they were going to get their first team in as a champ. So we go back to this year. Here's what happened on Saturday. I already knew when Georgia lost to Alabama, Florida State was out. Florida State was out because Texas, remember, had already knocked off Oklahoma State, which Oklahoma State had no business playing for a conference championship. Yeah. Iowa had no business playing for a conference championship. But look at their record. They played every bad team in the Big Ten. I mean, the only team Iowa played was Penn State, and what was that score? 31-0. The way the Big Ten is set up, there's nobody competing with Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State. It's the Big Three and everybody else. And I would say Big Two because Penn State has never been able to show that they could beat Michigan or Ohio State. So it's really the Big Two and everybody else in the Big Ten. So we get to this. And then the other thing that they threw out there. Does anybody even understand how you figure out strength of schedule? Do you know? Here's strength of schedule.
It's an algorithm.
People assume, no, it's really simple. It's not even that complicated. People assume it's who you played on your schedule. No, it's not. It's the people you played on your schedule and then their opponents. You know what decided Florida State and why they have the 55th best schedule as far as strength of schedule? Why it's so down on the totem pole? It came down to the cupcakes that they scheduled.
Yeah.
Their cupcakes were worse than other people's cupcakes. And so it's the difference of beating somebody by 50 or beating somebody by 35. Florida State played North Alabama, an FCS team. And I remind everybody, everybody's played an FCS team in college football except Southern Cal. Everybody. Unfortunately for Florida State, their cupcake was North Alabama, a team that won 3 games. Alabama scheduled Chattanooga. If Florida State played Chattanooga, they'd still win by 50. But because Florida State's cupcake was a bad FCS team, Alabama's cupcake was Chattanooga that's playing in the FCS playoffs. They get hurt. Southern Miss, a Southern Miss team that you can usually expect to be decent, right? Flirt with bowl eligibility. Because Southern Miss had a bad year and really bad year. They were 3-9. But they just were not very good at all. Because their bad team that you pay and get a W was worse than, say, MTSU. MTSU, 5 wins this year. It's those two simple things there that all of a sudden that 55 next to Florida State, as far as strength of schedule, jumps into the top 20. Could be top 10, could even be the top 5. It's not, Florida State played 11 Power 5 conference teams of their 13-game schedule. Alabama can't say that. Michigan can't say that. Washington can. 11. 10 during the regular season, and 1 is, of course, in the ACC title game. But how ironic was it that the whole thing was, well, Florida State's not the same team, and they were looking at the third string quarterback, Glenn, and what he did or did not do against Louisville. Well, the ironic part about this, it's not just a quarterback, it's the offense, right? In the rain, Florida State's offense produced more than Michigan indoors, a controlled climate, and their starting quarterback, who was in the conversation for the Heisman this year, and J.J. McCarthy, Florida State's backup, true freshman, first start in the rain, that offense still produced more offense than Michigan did. And Michigan had their starting quarterback. The other part about that is Todd Rodemaker, he could have played Monday. He would have cleared concussion protocol. It's not, and they're going to say, well, they're not the same team. Their defense is. They have 28 players, counting Jordan Travis, 28 players in different positions, offense, defense, special teams, kicking, punting. 28 players made either first team, second team, third team, or honorable mention for all ACC. And I have to remind everybody, the ACC had more bowl-eligible teams than the SEC, than the Big Ten, than the Big 12, and the Pac-12. When you want to look at mediocrity, Pac-12, Big Ten, bringing up the rear as far as mediocrity, as far as top to bottom in a conference, especially the lower half. Yeah. Did Michigan play anybody until November? No, they did not. I can't wait for Washington. I mean, Washington had 7 games against teams. Look, they had to convert on 4th down against a subpar Washington State team just to be able to win that game on rivalry week. Otherwise, Washington State was in field goal range.
Yeah.
But Washington dodged the bullet. I don't know why they pump up the Pac-12. And I'll give you a reason why I do believe. It's because all the conversation about Deion Sanders in the month of September. Yeah. At one point, the Pac-12 had 8 teams ranked in the top 25. How did that play out?
Yeah.
Did the Pac-12 live up to the billing? No, they did not. Did Deion Sanders in Colorado live up to the billing? No, they did not. So if you're going to put all your love about the Pac-12 on the shoulders of Colorado and Deion Sanders, you're going to be let down every time. And yet the committee lied to you, the general football fan, because there's no way you were leaving out a 1-loss SEC champ. But the problem, if Alabama had lost to, say, Oklahoma instead of Texas, Texas would not be in the playoff today. It would be Florida State. Alabama would be 3rd. Florida State would be 4th. But you can't bring the SEC champ has 1 loss, without bringing Texas. Texas benefited from the fact that Alabama made the playoff. It wasn't Texas. And yeah, they made it look good by putting Texas number 3 and Alabama number 4. That way it hid their lie. But the reality is, if Georgia had beaten Alabama on Saturday, your rankings would have been Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State. And I back that up by one more point. All the things they were denouncing Florida State about, they're not the same team. They got to back up. Why is Florida State number 5 ahead of Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon? Why is that the case? Explain that to me, because that throws out their lie just out the window. And it is a lie. It's not a clarification. It's not an explanation. It's an absolute lie. This is why in the future, I hope that there are lawsuits. I know Ron DeSantis is talking about suing. I think in the future, these committees should be public. Because we're talking about $1 billion industry as far as college football and college athletics. And last time I checked, how much of our money is going to these universities to support these universities?
Yes.
From now on, these committees should be open. All the conversations should be open, and we can see the complete truth of what's going on, because they lied to you.
Yeah. Let me throw this one at you. Great stuff, Johnny. You're rolling. Johnny, in Dothan, the Big Ten geographical footprint covers more than 70% of America's TV sets. That's why they're in. And that's That's just the truth. I mean, and it doesn't matter if it's fair. That's why they did it. But I'll say this too. Student athletes, I mean, there's a double standard. You know, a regular student at some schools is struggling with a 25 or a 26 ACT and a 3.2 on a 4.0 to get in. Okay. But if you're a student athlete trying to get into Michigan or a Division I school with those numbers, it's not even debatable. And then they want to go take that public money and have these secret meetings. I know, Johnny, you and I being residents of the volunteer state of Tennessee, we know about the sunshine laws. You know, you got to shed light on public meetings if public funds and all are used. There's just hypocrisy. By the way, I watched Oppenheimer last night. Man, you can see how nasty and vicious these bureaucrats can be when they want to take someone down. It doesn't matter. The term kangaroo court comes to mind. But let me throw this at you, Johnny. This is great stuff. David Baker, a lot of talk about FSU not in due to injuries and playing their third-string quarterback. If Alabama won the SEC championship with their third-string quarterback, would they have been left out? Johnny, a native of Madison County, Huntsville, Alabama, reply to that one. Good stuff from my man, David Baker.
Alabama, look, I don't have a problem with Alabama being in. I've said all along,
I don't either.
Alabama is one of the 4 best teams. Even when they lost to Texas in September, I saw the schedule. I saw the opportunity for Alabama to get better week in and week out. I am not shocked, not surprised whatsoever. I mean, I had Alabama beating Georgia on Saturday. I expected that. I don't have a problem with Alabama being in the Final Four. I really believe they're one of the 4 best teams. I have a problem that it was such a given that Texas as well as Washington had the easy pass over Florida State. That's where I have an issue with. I mean, look at Texas and their close wins down the stretch. They struggled against TCU. This is not the TCU of last year. It's probably like the TCU team that got beat by Georgia. But this TCU team this year got beat by Colorado, a team that Colorado's 4 wins was against TCU. They edged out Iowa State. You know, Texas was dodging the bullet, but Washington, even worse, had 7 wins by single scores. And we're not talking about top 10 competition. Everybody wants to say, well, Washington beat Oregon twice. Look at all of the other struggles that Washington had this year. I have no problems with Washington. I have no problem with Alabama being in the 4-team playoff because they really, to me, are one of the 4 best teams. And right now, I have Alabama winning the national championship. I think Bama will destroy Michigan. I think Texas will win by double digits against Washington, and Bama will beat Texas in the rematch because I've said this all along. I've always thought it was unfair that a team has to beat another team, especially if they lost to them. The other way around. If a team like, say, LSU in 2011, when they beat Alabama, I thought it was unfair that they had to beat them again to win the national title. I thought it was unfair when Florida State beat Florida in the regular season, a 1-versus-2 matchup. And because Nebraska getting upset, Florida State had to see Florida again in the Sugar Bowl, which decided the national title. And Florida State, after trailing by 4 at halftime, they lose war done. They get blown out in the second half, which gave Florida their first national title. So the same thing about this year. I think it'll be very unfair that Texas has to see Alabama again, and I don't think they survive that. Bama will be the national champs, which then brings up the other argument. If Florida State takes care of business against Georgia, the AP voters, do you take Alabama, the winner of the playoff, or do you take an undefeated Florida State team that has done something that Alabama could not do the last 2 years, and that is to beat LSU both times?
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is a great point. Kelly Leak, I love the picture of the Bad News Bears. I wonder if that's the guy who was on that baseball team. But the committee agreed to have an SEC representative, pure and simple. You and I both know Mr. Bill Hancock. That committee has 13 people on it. Yesterday, Tony Barnhart pointed out the fact that Jim Grobe, former football coach at Wake Forest, is on there. Boo Corrigan, NC State's athletic director, is on there. And Tony said, hey, I knew his father well, Gene Corrigan, great commissioner of the ACC. But people get into a room and they can be persuaded. Technically, here's the way it works. The Federal Reserve, the name Federal Reserve it's misleading. It's a private bank. And the president appoints a Federal Reserve chairman who's really the most powerful man in the world. Alan Greenspan would walk to those committee meetings with his briefcase and his files by himself without a big security entourage, whereas the head of the Memphis school superintendent rides around in a chauffeured limousine with police escorts, making over $1 million a year, running the largest babysitting service in Shelby County with kids that aren't even passing. But that's another story. I'm just saying, you look at the big picture. This committee, there's got to be full transparency, and you alluded to it. And this is something, fans aren't stupid. They see the committees and their talking heads are spewing. Again, I respect what Tony Barnhart said. I respect what Scott Rabalais said before you came on. I know what you're saying. Wow. I do think Alabama should be in there, because find me a fan base out there, Johnny, in America, that if you said at number 8, if we beat number 1, we shouldn't at least be 4 or 3 in the playoffs. So Bama, I think they did the most difficult thing of all. They beat number 1.
Right.
It's the other 3 teams. And you're right. When you look at Michigan's schedule, and I like Jim Harbaugh. I like his white socks and his birth control glasses and the way he touches.
Why do you like Jim Harbaugh? Why do you like the cheat?
Because he's a good Catholic man, but no, seriously.
Yeah, whatever.
But let me say.
Does that mean then he can cheat all he wants? And,
No,
and mess
I'm being
people
facetious.
all over and do a few Hail Marys and everything is forgotten? No. Is that what you're saying?
I'm kidding. I'm saying, but I do think he's been fun to watch him everywhere. But the truth will come out eventually on that. But they didn't.
The
play
reality
anybody.
is, by the way, you brought up Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is the reason why college football has no place for the Jim Harbaughs of the world. It's those individuals that love to cheat and then try to make excuses or whatever. I have no respect for the Jim Harbaughs. You know why Jim Harbaugh cheated? Because he couldn't win honestly. He couldn't beat Ohio State the right way. So he had to cheat. I mean, that's the thing that just drives me crazy about the Jim Harbaughs of college football.
Well, no, I'm just saying that bottom line, Michigan didn't play anybody really until late in the season, and they played Ohio State, and they beat them. And I think Ryan Day is going after – he doesn't want Jim Harbaugh in that league, but that's another story.
Well, I'm going to throw this other thing out there. People want to, denounce the ACC. I remind everybody in the last 10 years, the ACC has won 3 national championships. And guess who they beat to win those national titles? SEC teams. Florida State beating Auburn, Clemson beating Alabama both times. So in the last 10 years, the ACC has 3 national championships, and all of them against SEC teams. Look, I'm a big fan of the SEC, and look, Alabama deserves to be one of those 4 teams. I have a problem. Does Michigan, does Washington, does Texas, do they have a right to be there over Florida State? When we go back to, Florida State, well, they play in the ACC, so what? They beat Louisville. I remind everybody that Louisville team didn't just beat Notre Dame. And Notre Dame was number 10 in the country when Louisville played them. Louisville blasted Notre Dame. And you go, what's the big deal? Because if Notre Dame had 11 defensive players on the field against Ohio State would not have knocked off Notre Dame. On that final play, even with 10 players on defense by Notre Dame, Ohio State scored a touchdown by a foot. And guess where they scored that touchdown over? Where that 11th defensive player would have been on Notre Dame's defense. They scored a touchdown by a foot, not easily walking in, by a foot. It was that close, and they went where the 11th guy should have been on that Notre Dame defense on that final play. So what happens then? So how do we look at Notre Dame, and then how do we look at Louisville and their win over Notre Dame then? We'd have a different conversation, not only about the Ohio State thing, but also about Michigan. The Big Ten in recent years is a fraud. There's nobody, at least in the ACC, when you had Florida State, Miami joining, everybody upped their game in the ACC.
Yeah.
That's why there's 11 teams bowl eligible this year out of the ACC. And then people want to say, and this is what the ignorant fan out there, oh, so what? They beat Duke. There's a reason why Texas A&M hired Duke's head coach, because until Riley Leonard got injured for Duke, Duke was one of the top 15 teams in the country. Remember, they blasted Clemson the very first week. And people will want to denounce Clemson. Well, the reason why Clemson had 4 losses because they played a great Duke team. They got beat by Florida State at home at Clemson. So, but Duke, until Riley Leonard went down, Duke was one of the top 15 teams in the country. Duke was that good. If you were Michigan, if you were Ohio State, Alabama even, LSU, any of these teams, you would not have wanted to face Duke with a healthy Riley Leonard at quarterback. There's a reason why he has NFL prospect all over him. He's that good.
Yeah, he is. And this stuff of look, the committee has opened itself up to a lot of criticism by saying, well, with your third team quarterback, you're not the same team. Well, look, for what it's worth, the second team guy, Rodemaker, is going to be able to play in the bowl game against Georgia.
Yep. He's one of the most veteran backup quarterbacks in the country. He has backed up Jordan Travis the last 2 years. He's seen plenty of action. He led them when Jordan Travis went down the Louisville game last year. He led them to that win. He made a pass that even Tom Brady would be fortunate to make. That's what Florida State's backup did. Go back and look at the video at one of his pass completions that, once again, Joe Montana, Tom Brady would have been proud of. That's how good that was as a backup. He's one of the most veteran backups in all the country. And I still go back, even with a true freshman making his first start in the rain, Florida State's offense still outgained Michigan's offense with their starting quarterback. So you could throw the whole backup thing out the window. That's the worst. They're all just excuses because you can't have Alabama in and leave Texas out. Texas wrote in. Texas should be sending roses and flowers and plenty of steaks, everything to Alabama's athletic department, because without Alabama, Texas would not be in the playoff today.
Well, I was watching SEC Now. We're going to take a quick break. And Dari Noka, Matt Stinchcomb, Chris Doring, Takeo Spikes. And I love Takeo Spikes. But he said, look at that. I'm not going to watch that on TV. That ultimately, unfortunately, that's why it happened, but it doesn't make it right. I don't give a damn if it's my school
schedule. Look at the SOR. What that tells you is taking Florida State's schedule this year. You see how many teams that would have had more success, and I don't know how you could have more success than 13-0, but only 2 teams in the country, 2, could have had better success with that same Florida State schedule. So last time I checked, there's how many teams in the playoff? 4. That means Florida State should have been in the playoff, because that is the number that you want to be looking at, not strength of schedule that can be moved 30 or 40 notches because which 2 cupcakes you pick.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, the comparison is how other teams would do with your same schedule. Only 2 teams in the eyes of those rankings, those computer rankings, only 2 teams would have done better than Florida State.
Yeah, it's a great debate. Johnny, stay on with us right now. Vince Ferrara from the Sports Animal over in Knoxville is going to join us right after this quick break. Great stuff. I tell you what, you're changing a lot of people's minds, but in reality, I've never heard the argument what was Auburn? Should Auburn have been denied going to the Final Four in 2019 when Chuma Okeke tore his knee up in the game against North Carolina out in Kansas City? Hell no. Auburn put another player in there and they persevered. That's the story of sports. It's the story of life. It's the greatest reality show of all time. It's better than going to the circus when you're a kid and dodging the carnies when you're there trying to get, it's
like the other thing that not taking anything away from Nick Saban, head coach of Alabama, but I will still give you arguments for both Bobby Bowden and Bear Bryant. If you're playing under the same rules with a 14 playoff even, Bear Bryant, during that stretch from 71 to 81 in that 11-year stretch, Bear Bryant would have played for 9 national championships. He wins 3. He had a chance to play for 6 more under that system. And Bobby Bowden, yes, 2 national titles, but if they'd had a 14 playoff with Florida State during that 14-year run of top 5 finishes, they would have had a chance to play for 9 national championships in a 14 playoff. And nobody would argue the fact that at the end of the year and all those years, Florida State was the best team in the country, yet they would lose in September or early October against Miami and would not have a chance to play for it.
Yeah, 87 to 2014 straight years, a run of absolute dominance. Take a 1-minute break. We'll be right back for the final segment of Sidelines on Wednesday.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
And Vince Ferrara from over in Knoxville. And listen, man, college football, it's the sport that keeps on giving. And Vince, Tennessee going to go into the Cheez-It Bowl and play Iowa. And we're going to have Steve Hogan, the CEO of the Cheez-It Bowl, on the show Monday to talk with him. But what are your thoughts on this college football playoff? I'm sure there's been a little talk about it over on the Sports Animal in Knoxville. You're on with Johnny Ballpark Franks in Nashville, and making a point for Florida State being in there. And again, if you're a Florida State fan, you got a choice right now. You can get so mad and check out, or you can dial in and say, we're going to prove we're the best team in the country. And as Johnny alluded to earlier, win the Associated Press National Championship, make an overwhelming case for a split title in the last year of the 14 playoff. Nothing like a little controversy, is there?
We got it for sure. Rob, Johnny, great to be on with you guys.
Hey, Vince.
Honestly, we pay and should pay zero attention to the AP poll once the college football playoff poll comes out. So I'm not sure how much validity getting that at the end of the year should warrant. Kind of like UCF with them claiming their, America's national championship back in the day.
Yeah.
You could say that and point to that and stick it in whatever media guide you want and hang on to it. It means nothing because it's about the college football playoff. So, that is one thing that could happen, I guess. But
Vince, I will argue against that because Central Florida was not named number 1 team in the country by the Associated Press. You know who was named number 1 team in the country after the BCS title game? 2003, USC was declared the national champion by the AP poll, number 1. And so if you go and look around the Southern Cal facilities, do I see anything not acknowledging that? No, you see it. And look, if they can claim it, you're saying an Alabama fan, by the way, sent me this week. It'd be beneath Florida State to accept that national title. An Alabama fan who I had to remind that in 1941, a team that finished 20th in the AP poll after the bowl games had gone 9-2 with 2 losses. They accept, when you look at that 18 number, one of those 18 is that team because some obscure poll, I don't know if they had relatives in Alabama or what, but one of Alabama's 18 national championships is that 1941. That would be like, Vince, if Tennessee this year claims that they're the national champs. That's exactly what we're talking about, the 1941 national championship for Alabama.
Well, again, they have a right to do whatever they want, and USC can put it in their facility. But the point is that around the country, no one is going to recognize that or give that any validity. You can claim anything you want. And media guides each week in game notes, people have differences of opinions on whether it's national championships or SEC titles or division titles or all wins. Teams have different records and everybody can claim what they want. But in terms of the national landscape, that's not going to carry a whole lot of weight. But back to the original point, I see it both ways. I think it should be most deserving versus most the four best teams, because if they're doing the four best teams, I still don't think they got the four best teams in there, because I think Georgia is one of those four best teams as well. So I'm not crazy about judging Florida State off of a player that they lost like they try to do in the NCAA tournament. There are plenty of teams that are Vegas favorites. Just look in the Pac-12 championship game where Oregon was 9.5, 10-point favorites. We go by the eye test. We go by Vegas, and they get it wrong. So from that standpoint, I feel terribly for Florida State. Also, it's kind of on them at the very end, as unfair as it was. We all knew, I said it beforehand, Florida State's going to have to not only win that ACC title game, but win it with style points. And they weren't able to do that. Just surviving that game under the circumstances, knowing what was coming with Boo Kerrigan, and he laid it out in advance without saying we were going to judge Florida State based on not having Jordan Travis. He put that little nugget out there several weeks beforehand when Travis first went down. He said, we don't judge teams what they're going to be potentially with or without players. We take all of that stuff into account at the very end. That was his out to be able to do it. Fair or not, he put it out there. Florida State did not look good in that championship game offensively. I get the defense. I get all that. If Florida State blows out Louisville and looks good with their backup their third string quarterback, I think Alabama gets left out. I think that would have convinced them. So it's not like they had zero opportunity to show what they could do in a potential playoff game. Again, I don't think it's fair to judge what they would do in that situation with extended period of time to prepare. But there was a little bit of an opportunity for Florida State to do something about it. The other thing is that alliance of ADs. And Jim Phillips was part of that group that decided, no, we're mad at
Stop with that nonsense, because it never got to that point. In 2021, they weren't worrying about a 12-team playoff. And I remind everybody about this. It never got to like the third reading in a city council member. Now the vote is what were they thinking about in 2021? They were thinking about survival, because Texas and Oklahoma left in the middle of the night, just like when Baltimore Colts left for Indianapolis. And so these conferences, remember, the Big 12 almost died in 2021 because of what happened with Texas and Oklahoma. They weren't thinking about whether or not they get a playoff team. They were hoping that they would survive. The Pac-12, look what happened. They didn't survive. So they were thinking about that. They were thinking about name, image, and likeness, which blew up overnight that same summer. So you had not only Texas and Oklahoma happening, you had the first 3 weeks of name, image, and likeness. You also had survival after COVID-19. The last thing on their minds was whether or not you're having a 4-team playoff or a 12-team playoff. So that part is nonsense. And how about the fact that Florida State's offense, with their guy who played high school ball last year, making his first start in the rain, Florida State's offense, even with that, who would not be playing in the playoffs, it would be their veteran backup quarterback who has yet to lose a game, who has produced constantly for 2 years. Their third string quarterback making his first start in the rain. Florida State's offense outproduced Michigan's offense on Saturday night with their veteran starting quarterback who was in the Heisman Trophy conversation. And they were in the nice, beautiful confines of inside. And yet Florida State in the rain with a third string quarterback making his first start, a true freshman, they still outgained Michigan.
All right, Seminoles fan, I feel you. I hear you.
I do. I feel him. I know as an Auburn fan how I felt 20 years ago. Vince.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We could go on ad nauseum on this and go back and forth. I have counters on that, but I don't want to take up all y'all's time on this. We talked about it here some, and man, it is. I can't wait for next year. Certainly, like I said, I see it both ways. But I was in the end a little surprised that they did leave Florida State out, whether they should be there or not.
I do have two questions for both of you, because we've been seeing this for the last 2, 3, 4 years. I think Sunday is the beginning of the end. The way, I mean, look, I remember when we had a limited handful number of bowls. We're going to bowl games was special, which means you were really one of the better teams in the country. Now you're having to look and search to be able to fill the 6 and 6 spots. I think that Sunday was the beginning of the end for the way we look at bowl games. It was already getting there, but now, not unless your bowl game is affiliated with a playoff game, they don't matter anymore. I mean, looking at the opt-outs, the only way I would say that you can survive and keep the bowl games is make it a clause in these contracts as far as name, image, and likeness, where if you are healthy and you opt out of your team's bowl game, then you have to give back a substantial portion of your name, image, and likeness money. Whether it's, if you earn $1 million, whether you give back $750,000, whatever it is, but there should be a clause there that says, Vince, I know you've got potential in the NFL next year, but if you're healthy and you're not playing, you have to give back 75 or 80% of the money I just gave you. That's why I applaud Bryce Young and Will Anderson playing last year in Alabama's bowl game. So that is a major concern of mine because I love the bowl games, but now they're like exhibition games now. If you're not playing with a team that got you to that point, what's the point?
Vince?
Well, first of all, I think they would have a difficult time doing that because who's going to determine who's truly healthy when we don't have any sort of reporting status of injuries week to week in college athletics? I mean, gambling hasn't given us true injury list in college athletics. So how are you going to tell a kid who is banged up, who probably on a real game day in the regular season would play, but then is opting not to play? I mean, I've seen it with certainly a number of Tennessee players where they've skipped out. Alontae Taylor of the Saints is one of them. Yeah, could he have fought through it in a regular season game if it was against Alabama or a big game? Yeah, he probably could have played, but he used all that time to get fully healthy, the season, everything, and he ran a great 40 time, and it helped him in the draft process. And there's others that have done that around the country too. So I think you'd have a hard time saying, well, you're healthy, you get punished you have to give some of your NIL money back. I think that's a slippery slope they would never be able to go to, even though I get what you're saying. The Bulls already have lost a lot of their luster. So there's probably going to be even more of that when we go to the 12-team playoff. That's the direction we're going. But I mean, some coaches, the players getting the extra practices, getting the experience, that's not the be-all, end-all, but those are bonuses now. They've laid it out to where that doesn't count against your red shirt. You can play 4 games, and all the postseason is in addition to that. So those don't take away from kids' eligibility or anything like that. It's extra opportunity for playing time. Some people use it, and it vaults them to the next year. Some people – it means nothing. Tennessee had 16 players participate in bowl practices. Very few of them got on the field, so they didn't fully take advantage of it. And there's other examples of it as well where it can or cannot help you. So there's also the experience, and some kids do want to compete. I asked Jacob Warren, tight end for Tennessee, I said, have you already made your decision? He's a 6-year senior. Have you already made your decision on whether you're going to play a bowl game? He's like, absolutely. I have not. I'm not going to miss out on another opportunity to be out there with my guys. Not everybody is going on to the NFL. There's a lot of them where this is their last opportunity to suit up with guys that they've spent so much time with and experience college football or even football altogether. That's a larger percentage of the college football players than the ones that are making decisions to opt out for the NFL.
Yeah, I'll tell you how you can do it.
I was going to say something too, Rob, which he brings up another point. I don't know if you're aware of HIPAA laws. I was aware of it when I worked in college athletics. You're not supposed to disclose anything about an individual's injury. I mean, the reason why is because, say, I have a senior who got injured, and so he played his last college game, and now he's looking to get ready for the NFL. You can't hurt somebody. You can't just – I mean, am I telling you, Vince, and sharing your medical records with the whole world? No, it's against the law to do that. My wife is having foot surgery next Wednesday. Guess how many weeks she's going to be out? And they're going to be breaking bones and realigning bones. Guess how many weeks she's going to be out? 5 weeks. On November 18th, when Jordan Travis went down, The bottom line is, remember, Utah hid the injury to Cam Ridings for 2 months, for 8 weeks. So if Florida State had not disclosed the fact that Jordan Travis was a season-ending injury, if they said, okay, he's having surgery and we're going to be rehabbing and we're going to work to get him back for the semifinal game. So at this point, he is not out. Because guess what? That is longer than your normal time it takes for broken bones to heal. So if Florida State had basically not told the truth, not lie, but not really told the truth, are we looking at Florida State differently now with the fact that they could have had Jordan Travis in their semifinal matchup? I mean, you're leaving that door open now for schools to lie or mislead about injured players, especially if it could impact them whether or not they get into a playoff game.
Yeah. And Vince, real quick, I like this. Colton in Laramie, Wyoming. What happens if a Marine with 30 days left on his contract, tour of duty, decides he's sleeping in on a combat mission? They don't get that option. And I detest the term opt out. Parents can't opt out on raising children. If they do, they're pretty sorry. But I'm just saying it's very I think the investors in NIL, I do know this, and y'all are both talking with people in NIL. I've talked to people at different schools, and let me tell you, and I know some people that are doing, they said, let me tell you what, if I'm paying, a lot of money for a kid and he thinks he can just do what he wants, he's my employee now. He's my investment. And you watch what happens, Vince, when the Supreme Court gets involved, when try to tamper with that and say, no, he's going to play in that bowl game, by God. And that's why the free market will correct this stuff. And having accountability like that, Vince, will make the bowl games matter. I mean, that's what I think will happen. But anyway, Vince, the Tennessee deal, Joe Milton, what's his status? What Lama Leva? Let's talk about that going into the bowl game. I wanted to get you on here. This is great stuff because both of y'all see all the comments are going. Both of these guys are making great points, and I appreciate. I hope y'all aren't mad at each other. I mean,
Vince and I go back a long ways. Okay. Vince and I are buds. No,
we have a friendly show here, okay? And
hey, we could disagree, but at the end, we'll still have a beer with each other. So
hey, look, I got Mallory in the other rooms, an Alabama grad. We love her. She's still a good person. So, but no, I love this stuff because I'm learning a ton from this. But Vince, for the record, and again, in my wealth management practice, if I had a client that was in a situation about to make a bunch of money, I'd say, go play. You can't be afraid.
Vince made a good point a while ago where these players want that opportunity. Any player that you talk to that's worth their talent, they will tell you they don't want to play the bad teams. If a player had their choice, their schedule would have Michigan, Ohio State, Southern Cal, Texas, Oklahoma every week. I mean, that's what I guess basically that's what we're going to get now with the new SEC starting next year. Because I looked at Alabama's schedule in the month of November. They go to LSU, they go to Oklahoma, and then have to play Auburn. Yeah. But that's the other part about it. In the end, if Bama does knock off Michigan, if Bama beats Texas, Bama's there as the national champs. In their hearts and minds, they'll never know if they were the best team in the country this year. Nobody who wins the national championship in this playoff will never know if they are truly the best team because the committee took that out of their hands when they left Florida State, an undefeated team, out.
Yeah. Vince?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's unfortunate and injuries happen. I mean, look at if Jalen Milroe had gone down against, for Alabama, and we already saw what the backup quarterback situation was there, it would happen to them. It sucks. It's unfortunate. I don't think anyone's apologizing if Alabama wins at all, whether Florida State is there or not. Yes, it's going to be pointed to, but Alabama had injuries a couple of years ago, and it held them back with their wide receivers. I mean, their fans can point to, hey, what if we were fully healthy? It would have been different against Georgia. That is what it is. It's also sports. So some storylines will never go away. It just kind of is what it is, but that'll still count for them. And the ratings are going to be incredible regardless of who's in there. It only adds to I think the intensity, and I think it'll add to the interest in that Florida State Georgia game as well.
I have a question, Vince. You've obviously watched Florida State's defense. You know how great that defense is. They have great two defensive ends that have NFL potential. They have great defensive tackle in the middle too. You think about that solid defense. We saw what they were able to do against the quarterback who's going to win the Heisman Trophy Saturday, and what they were able to do is shut them down in the second half. I look at Michigan, I look at Texas, I look at Washington, I look at Alabama. All four of those teams would struggle against that Florida State defense. So how many points would you have needed if you were Florida State's offense in the first place? Because if you're not scoring, you're not going to win anyway. I think all four of those teams, because first of all, Michigan is not going to beat Florida State with their passing game, and Florida State's defense would have been able to shut down Corum in their running game. So what's Michigan going to do? Alabama, I mean, look, if Florida State can shut down Jaden Daniels, they certainly can shut down Jalen Milroe. So that takes Alabama out. So when I go down that list, how many points would you have needed if you were Florida State's offense?
Man, Johnny, I respectfully disagree. Florida State has one of the best defenses in the country. Jaden Daniels and LSU were not playing the way they did for most of the year at that time. Florida State, by the way, they gave 20 points to Miami. I think there's 4 teams in the college football playoff that are much better offensively than Miami. They give up 20 to Duke. There's 4 teams much better than Duke's offense. And it's not like they played amazing offensively when Jordan Travis was there as well. Now that helps you. That should help you on defense in theory. They put so much on that defense. I get that. That's extra strain on them. But which Duke's offense are you talking about? The offense with Riley Leonard or the offense without Riley Leonard? Which one did Florida State play?
They played the one with Riley Leonard.
Okay.
And then he got hurt in the second half.
They don't compare to those offenses that are in the college football playoff. So my point is that that just basing off of defense, that's not going to win you a national championship. They're not just going to shut everybody down. LSU and what Jaden Daniels is doing now, it's on a completely different level. Jalen Milroe is playing on a completely different level than earlier in this year. Now, I'm not saying that you dock them for playing a team when they weren't as good. The resume is what it is when you played them. But if you're talking about matchups, if they were there and in their current situation and who would win, I'm sorry.
Alabama was fortunate to survive the Auburn game. Alabama was fortunate to survive Texas A&M. Alabama was fortunate to survive Arkansas. So you can throw out Florida State and Miami is a rivalry game. When you're Florida State, when you play Florida, no, that's my point. Everybody wants to say and talk about Florida State struggling against Miami or struggling against Florida. I remind folks that Florida team actually led LSU in the third quarter when the waning moments of the third quarter, and they had the 9th ranked team in the country in Missouri the week before the Florida State game. They had them beat until the coaches mishap and allowed Missouri to kick a field goal with 5 seconds to go to win by 2. People, when they say, well, Florida State beat a bad Florida team. Well, that Florida team, last time I checked, they handed Tennessee everything they wanted and more when Tennessee got spanked down there in the swamp. So it's interesting how they use arguments to help themselves against Florida State, but the same reality and the same kind of rationale goes out the window when they're looking at where it doesn't benefit Florida State in those same scenarios.
But Johnny, you can't connect the dots. So you played this, you did this against this team, therefore that means that versus this team. I mean, that's not college athletics. It's week to week. I mean, you mentioned the rivalry games.
Then be honest with, if you're the committee, don't lie to us. Like, how much was being put into the strength of schedule? You know how the strength of schedule, you know why Florida State's schedule is, the strength of schedule is 55th? It has nothing to do with the 11 Power 5 conference teams. It was the 2 cupcakes that Florida State played compared to everybody else cupcakes. North Alabama was in a different country and it's an FCS team. So if Florida State had scheduled Chattanooga instead of North Alabama, you jump up 15 to 20 points in that. Then if you had scheduled MTSU, that was 5-7 this year, instead of Southern Miss, you would have jumped up another 15. those two games, it wasn't the meat of on that bone that killed Florida State and that strength of schedule. It was their two cupcakes that everybody schedules except Florida State's cupcakes this year were worse than others. So whether you win by 60 or if you win by 40, those two cupcakes cost Florida State in that category.
Yeah. Vince, but Johnny, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Vince, first off, thank you for taking time. I know you had a day off today. Love having you on here. This is great debate.
A day off? What's Vince? A day off? What's up with that?
Hey, man, I work so hard during the year. We don't have time to take vacations until the regular season ends. So.
I know, honestly, I mean, it is kind of crazy. You really never take off in this business because something's always happening. But, man, Vince, again, Johnny, let people know, both of y'all, I'll start with Vince first, how they can follow you, and you all do great work. It's coming out every day, folks. Do yourself a favor. Follow these guys. We bring them on the show because they're great at what they do, and we're going to keep doing it. So tag us out, Vince.
Yeah, just to answer one of your previous questions, Joe Milton, as far as we know, is going to play. Nico Iamaleava, the 5-star freshman, that's who fans want to play and start. If Joe Milton's there, I think Joe Milton's going to start. That hasn't been declared. Josh Heupel didn't specify that when he had his Cheez-It Citrus Bowl press conference afterwards. So we'll talk more about Heupel, and I'll be down there in Orlando covering it too. So feel free to holler me if you want more from Orlando and from Florida. But yeah, as far as we know, both of those guys are in, and there's just so many roster comings and goings right now with seniors with decisions and transfer portal in and out and offers to guys in the transfer portal and an early signing period coming in a couple days. So that's really where a lot of our focus has been here locally as it is in other markets. But you can follow me on all the social media, same handle, Vince Sports, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter/X. And then on our website, 991thesportsanimal.com, just look for Sports Talk. That's our morning show that John Wilkerson and I do. We are the Tennessee Baseball Radio broadcast team, and we do a bunch of shows together, so you can get all our podcasts there and blogs in the blog section, all that kind of fun stuff.
Too bad there's nothing to talk about. Johnny, tag them out.
You can keep up with me on X/Twitter at BP Frank Show, or follow me on Facebook at Johnny Ballpark Franks.
Hey, man, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Go out and make great things happen today and follow these guys, folks. Why, absolutely, you will learn more in the last 2 hours than you will by staring at the idiot box all day. I guarantee it. Take care.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Take care.